My wife Sarah has always been my anchor. For 10 years, she was the steady hand, the warm smile, the comfortable silence at the end of a long day. We built a good life, a quiet life, filled with predictable routines and small joys. I worked hard in finance, dealt with numbers and projections, and she worked as a freelance graphic designer. Our world felt complete, a comfortable bubble we had carefully constructed. Then, one Tuesday evening, our bubble popped. It started innocently enough. Sarah came home buzzing, her eyes wide with an excitement I hadn't seen in her for years. Not since we planned our wedding, maybe. She practically bounced into the kitchen, where I was making dinner, a whirlwind of energy. "Alex, you won't believe it," she said, her voice a little breathless. "Emily and I have an idea. A huge idea. Emily is Sarah's younger sister. They're close, always have been. A little too close sometimes, I thought, in a way that often felt like I was the third wheel in their sisterly universe. But I loved Sarah, and Emily was family." So I smiled, nodded, and asked, "Oh yeah? What kind of idea are we talking about?" "A business," she declared, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "A bakery and coffee shop. Can you imagine? Fresh bread, artisanal pastries, good coffee. We've been dreaming about this for ages, but we finally got serious." My initial reaction was a mix of mild amusement and slight apprehension. Sarah was creative, yes, but business. She'd never shown much interest in the cutthroat world of commerce. Emily, on the other hand, was more practical, but also a bit impulsive. A bakery and coffee shop sounded like a pipe dream, something born of a Pinterest board and a Saturday morning brunch. "That sounds wonderful, honey," I said, trying to sound supportive. "But a business? That's a big step." Sarah waved a dismissive hand. We know, but we've done our research. We've got a business plan. We've looked at the numbers. It's solid, Alex, really solid." She launched into a passionate monologue about market gaps, unique selling propositions, and projected profits. Emily joined her from the living room, adding details and backing up Sarah's points. They were a unified front, two bright-eyed entrepreneurs ready to conquer the world, one croissant at a time. I listened, stirring the pasta, occasionally interjecting with a question about startup costs or licensing, trying to inject a dose of realism into their boundless enthusiasm. They had answers, surprisingly. They talked to friends who owned small businesses, read books, even attended a free seminar. They were serious. That much was clear. Over the next few days, the bakery became the only topic of conversation. Every meal, every quiet moment was filled with discussions about flour types, espresso machines, and potential decor. I offered practical advice where I could, drawing on my finance background, cautioning them about overspending, about the long hours, about the risks. They listened, nodding, but their optimism was unshakable. They saw only success, only the sweet smell of freshly baked goods and the clinking of coffee cups. Then came the location scouting. This was the part that started to make me uneasy. They spent weekends driving around town, looking at empty storefronts, talking to real estate agents. They'd come back sometimes defeated, sometimes energized, with tales of perfect spots that were too expensive, or cheap spots that were too run down. One evening, about a week after the initial announcement, Sarah burst through the door clutching a flyer in her hand, her face absolutely beaming. Emily was right behind her, equally excited. "Alex, we found it. The perfect place." Sarah practically shouted, jumping up and down like a child. "It's exactly what we need. Big windows, good foot traffic, decent kitchen space, and it's not too pricey," Emily chimed in. "And the landlord seems really easy to work with. The agent says he's open to tenant improvements and flexible lease terms for new businesses." My heart gave a strange little lurch. The way Sarah said easy to work with landlord and flexible lease terms felt oddly personal, even though I knew it couldn't be. I put down my book. My curiosity piqued. That's great, honey. Where is it? Sarah held out the flyer. It's on Maple Street, you know. That old building near the park? The one with the big brick facade. Number 212 Maple Street. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My ears started ringing, a low hum that drowned out the excited chatter of my wife and her sister. Number 212 Maple Street. My building. The words echoed in my head, a terrifying, impossible refrain. I stared at the flyer. A carefully crafted advertisement for a vacant commercial space, with the address clearly printed at the bottom. 212 Maple Street. There was no mistaking it. My stomach plummeted, a cold dread washing over me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, frantically trying to process this information. Of all the buildings in all the towns, it had to be this one, the one I owned. The one I had bought years ago as a private investment, a sort of silent project. I'd never bothered to tell Sarah about. I had acquired 212 Maple Street about 5 years ago. It was a distressed property, a former old hardware store that had gone belly up. I saw potential in its location and its sturdy structure. My initial plan was to renovate it, turn it into a multi-purpose office space, or maybe even a boutique apartment complex. But then work got crazy. Other investments demanded my attention, and the building just sat there, a line item on my hidden financial statements. I'd hired a property management company to handle the occasional repairs and to find a tenant, though I hadn't pushed them hard. It was just an asset, a placeholder for a future project. It wasn't something I actively thought about or discussed. It was my quiet thing, a piece of my financial world that simply didn't intersect with our shared life. And now, here it was, the nexus of our lives, crashing together in the most spectacular and horrifying way possible. Sarah, my Sarah, and Emily, her sister, wanted to open their dream business in my building. Alex? Are you okay? You look a little pale, Sarah asked, her excited smile faltering slightly as she noticed my stunned expression. I forced a smile, a shaky, unconvincing grimace that probably looked more like indigestion. Fine. Just surprised. Maple Street, huh? That's quite a spot. My voice sounded strangely detached, as if coming from someone else. Isn't it perfect? Emily chirped, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. We've got an appointment with the agent tomorrow to look at it properly, and then maybe we can talk to the landlord. Talk to the landlord. Talk to me. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. My mind was reeling, trying to formulate a plan, any plan, to navigate this impossible situation. Do I tell them? Do I pretend I don't own it? What would happen if they found out later? The thought of Sarah's face, her hurt and betrayal, if she discovered I'd kept such a massive secret from her, twisted my gut. It wasn't just that I owned a building, it was that I owned their building, the very foundation of their dreams, and I had kept it a secret from her for years. The reasons for my secrecy were convoluted even to me. When I first bought it, it was just another investment. Nothing exciting enough to talk about at dinner. Then, as the years passed, it became a quiet corner of my life, a place where I could tinker with plans and ideas without having to explain them to anyone. It wasn't that I was actively hiding it from Sarah, more like I never saw the need to bring it up. It wasn't a shared asset, not something we had discussed for our future. It was just Alex's investment. Now it was a gaping chasm between us. The evening continued around me in a blur of bakery talk. Sarah and Emily were already sketching out floor plans, discussing paint colors, envisioning their grand opening. I sat there, nodding, offering generic affirmations, while my mind raced through every possible scenario. If I told them, it would shatter their trust. Why did you hide it, Alex? Why didn't you tell me you owned a commercial building? And this commercial building? It would feel like a betrayal, a secret kept for too long. If I didn't tell them, how long could I keep up the charade? What kind of relationship would that be, built on such a fundamental deception? The silence in my head was deafening, even as their excited chatter filled the kitchen. I looked at Sarah, her face flushed with dreams, and a cold dread settled deep in my chest. My secret, once a harmless oversight, had just become a ticking time bomb, poised to blow up everything we had built. My heart ached, not just for the impossible situation, but for the loss of innocence. The sudden, terrifying realization that my comfortable bubble was about to burst, and I was the one holding the pin. The next morning, the phantom ringing in my ears had subsided, replaced by a dull ache behind my eyes. I hadn't slept much. My mind had been a relentless carousel of what-ifs and how do I fix this. The alarm went off, jarring me further, and I dragged myself out of bed, careful not to disturb Sarah, who was still asleep, a serene smile on her face, probably dreaming of bad idiots. I went through the motions of my morning routine, making coffee, checking emails, but my thoughts were elsewhere, fixated on 212 Maple Street. My building, their dream. The two concepts clashed like cymbals in my brain. Sarah woke up, still radiating that incredible energy. "Morning, sleepyhead," she chirped, kissing my cheek. "Today's the day. Emily and I are meeting the agent at 10. Wish us luck." "Good luck," I mumbled, trying to sound enthusiastic. "Let me know how it goes." After they left, the silence in the house was oppressive. I couldn't focus on work. My phone sat beside me, mocking me. I could call the property management company, tell them to pull the listing, make up some excuse. But that would immediately raise red flags for Sarah and Emily. They'd already seen the flyer. They were clearly interested. Pulling it now would look suspicious, or, at best, incredibly inconvenient for them. I thought about calling Sarah, just blurting it out. "Hey, funny thing, that building you are looking at?" "Yeah, that's mine." The words tasted like ash. How would she react? Shock, anger, disappointment. The years of quiet trust would crumble in an instant. She'd question everything, every secret I might have ever kept. And it wasn't just a simple asset. This was their dream. To pull the rug out from under them like that, after all their excitement, seemed cruel. No, direct confrontation was out, at least for now. I needed more time. Time to think, time to plan. But what was the plan? My phone buzzed. It was Emily. "Alex, hey. Sarah and I are just finishing up with the agent. This place is even better than we thought. To here is so much potential. We're just grabbing a coffee now to talk about it. Want to join us?" My heart seized. Number definitely no. I couldn't be there, watching them fawn over my own property, pretending I was just a supportive husband. "Oh, hey Emily. Can't, actually. Swamped with work today. You two have fun. Let me know what you decide." "Will do. Wish you were here. It's amazing," she said, and then hung up. I sank back into my chair. Amazing. Of course it was amazing. It was a solid building in a prime location. That's why I bought it. Later that afternoon, when Sarah returned, she was practically floating. "Alex, it's perfect." "Absolutely perfect. We put in an offer. A lease offer, I mean. The agent said the owner is probably going to accept. He seemed really keen to get a good tenant in there." My stomach clenched. An offer already. Wow, that was fast. We didn't want to lose it. Emily and I talked it over, looked at the numbers again. It just feels right. We even did a little dreaming about how we'd lay out the counter, where the ovens would go. It's going to be so beautiful. Her eyes shone with such pure joy that it physically hurt me to look at her. So, what's next? I asked, my voice a little hoarse. The agent said he'd present our offer to the owner today or tomorrow. And then, if they accept, we sign the lease. We're getting a lawyer to look over the terms, of course. We're being smart about this, Alex, smart. They thought they were being smart. And here I was, the owner, silently orchestrating their dream, knowing full well the seismic secret that lay beneath it all. I knew the property manager, a guy named Mark. He'd been handling my properties for years. He was discreet, professional. I could trust him. My immediate thought was to call him, tell him to push the lease through, to make sure Sarah and Emily got the deal. But then what? What happens when they ask for a new coat of paint? Or a plumbing issue arises? Or they need an extension on a payment? I'd be the anonymous landlord granting their wishes or denying their requests. All while sitting across the dinner table from my wife, listening to her talk about her difficult landlord or her generous landlord. It was a twisted, impossible scenario. But the alternative, confessing everything now, felt even worse. It would crush them. It would ruin this moment, this incredible spark of hope and purpose that had ignited in Sarah. Could I really be the one to extinguish that flame? To say, oh, by the way, that dream you are building, it's on my land, and I've been lying to you about it? Number, not yet. Maybe not ever. I rationalized it. Maybe it was a good thing. I could quietly ensure they got a fair deal, that they weren't exploited. I could be the benevolent, unseen hand. Could make sure the building was sound, that they didn't run into any unforeseen structural problems. I could protect them without them knowing. It was a terrible, self-serving justification, but in my panic it seemed like the only viable path. That night I called Mark. Hey Mark, Alex here. About 212 Maple Street. T here is a lease offer coming in from 2 women, a bakery and coffee shop. Oh yeah, Mr. Miller and Miss Johnson. Very keen. Seems like a good proposal. They're a new business, so the terms are a bit flexible, but they seem promising. Mark's voice was calm and professional, completely unaware of the domestic drama he was now a part of. Yes, well, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I want you to push that through. Make sure they get the best possible terms. Give them a good rate, maybe some flexibility on the first few months' rent. I want them to succeed. And make sure everything is watertight in the contract. No surprises. No problem, Mr. Miller. You got it. You want to be the benevolent landlord, huh? Always good to help out new ventures. Benevolent. The word rang hollow, benevolent and deceptive. Maybe. Something like that, Mark. Just make sure it goes smoothly and discreetly. Understood, he said. And that was that. The wheels were in motion. I had consciously chosen the path of deception. The die was cast. The next few days were excruciating. Sarah and Emily were over the moon when they got the call that their lease offer had been accepted. They hugged, they cried, they celebrated with sparkling cider. I watched them, a phantom smile plastered on my face, my heart heavy with the weight of my secret. The landlord seems really nice, Alex, Sarah said over dinner one night. The agent said he was very understanding about us being a new business. He gave us a really fair deal, even a few months of reduced rent to help us get started. Isn't that amazing? I just nodded, my throat tight. That's wonderful, honey. Really great. The words felt like lies, coating my tongue with a bitter residue. They signed the lease a few days later. Sarah brought home a copy, neatly folded. Here it is, the official beginning of Sweet Spot Bakery and Brews, she declared, holding it up like a trophy. I took it from her, careful to keep my hand from shaking. The document was thick, filled with legal jargon. My eyes scanned the header, the tenant names, Sarah Miller and Emily Johnson, and then the landlord. Maple Street Holdings LLC, my company. The one I used for all my anonymous property ventures. It was perfect, legally sound and utterly damning. I looked at Sarah's joyous face, then back at the lease, then back at her. The secret was locked in, sealed by contract, by dreams, by the very foundation of their new venture. There was no going back now. I had stepped onto a path where I was the hidden puppeteer, the silent observer, the anonymous landlord of my wife's deepest aspirations. And I had no idea how it would end, or when the strings would inevitably snap, taking everything down with them. The dilemma was no longer about whether to tell them. It was about how long I could possibly keep the truth hidden, and what the fallout would be when it inevitably came to light. The thought alone was enough to break my heart. The weeks that followed were a blur of frenetic activity. Sarah and Emily dove headfirst into transforming 212 Maple Street from a vacant, dusty shell into their dream big. They spent hours there every day, scrubbing, painting, measuring. I'd come home from my office to find Sarah covered in paint splatters, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, but her eyes alight with a fierce, almost manic energy. She was exhausted, but exhilarated. My role was that of the supportive husband, the encouraging ear. I'd listen intently as they described their progress. The new counter they were designing, the perfect shade of cream paint for the walls, the industrial ovens they were researching. Every detail they excitedly shared was another invisible chain tightening around my chest. Each time Sarah mentioned the landlord or the property manager, I felt a jolt of anxiety. Mark, my property manager, was doing an excellent job maintaining the illusion. He handled all their inquiries, forwarded their requests, and kept me updated. He was the perfect shield. My biggest fear was a casual comment, a slip of the tongue. What if Sarah mentioned something specific about the building's history that I had once mentioned to her, in a different context, not realizing she'd associated with this particular building? What if she asked me for advice about a lease clause that I, as the landlord, had drafted? The mental gymnastics required to keep my two lives separate were exhausting. I started making excuses to avoid going to the building. Oh, honey, I am swamped with work. Or, I'd love to, but I promised David I'd help him with his taxes. Sarah, immersed in her project, usually just nodded, occasionally expressing a fleeting disappointment. Emily was too busy to notice. They were too absorbed in their own world, a world I was secretly a part of, but from behind a thick, impenetrable veil. Despite my internal turmoil, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of pride. They were pouring their hearts and souls into this. I'd see photos Sarah posted on her private social media of their progress. Before and after shots of a freshly painted wall, the gleaming new tile they'd laid down, the rough sketches of their logo. It was impressive. They were learning so much, growing into these new roles as business owner. And I, the anonymous owner of the space, was inadvertently enabling it. One evening, Sarah came home distraught. Alex, we have a problem, a big problem. Her voice was shaking. The old plumbing. It's worse than we thought. The main line burst today when we were testing the sinks. Water everywhere. It's a disaster. We've got to replace a huge section of it. It's going to cost a fortune. Our budget is already stretched so thin. My heart sank. This was it, a real crisis. A test of my anonymous benevolence. Did you call Mark? I asked, trying to sound calm and concerned. Yes. He said he'd send someone out first thing tomorrow to assess it. But he also said, structural issues are usually the tenant's responsibility for older buildings, unless it was a pre-existing condition, and they won't know until they inspect it. We can't afford this, Alex. Not right now. Tears welled up in her eyes. We put so much into this. I felt a surge of protectiveness, combined with a sharp stab of guilt. Of course, it was a pre-existing condition. That building was old, and I knew the plumbing was iffy. It was one of the reasons I hadn't pushed for tenants earlier. I had intended to fix it myself, but like everything else, it had been put off. Now it was their burden. Hey, don't worry, I said, putting my arm around her. Let's see what the plumber says tomorrow. Maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. And if it is, maybe Mark can help. He seems like a reasonable guy. That night I called Mark. Mark, it's Alex. About the plumbing at 212 Maple. I know it's an old system. Make sure the plumber determines it's a pre-existing issue. And get it fixed. My expense. Get the best crew, no shortcuts. And make sure it's done quickly. They need to get back on track. Mark paused. Are you sure, Mr. Miller? It could be a significant cost. We could argue it's tenant responsibility per the lease terms we drafted. I am sure, Mark, I said, my voice firm. It's a pre-existing condition. I want it handled. No questions asked. And again, discreetly. Make it seem like the landlord is just being generous, or that it was clearly his responsibility after all. Whatever narrative works. Understood, Mr. Miller. Your wish is my command. They'll be pleased. Pleased. They would be pleased, completely unaware that the generous landlord was me. The situation was getting more tangled, more ethically complex. I was actively manipulating events, using my secret ownership to help them, which was just another layer of the deception. But what choice did I have? Let their dream crumble because of old pipes, knowing I could fix it. The guilt would have eaten me alive. The next day, Sarah called me from the bakery, her voice overflowing with relief. Alex, you won't believe it. The plumber came, and he said it was definitely a pre-existing issue. They're going to replace the whole section, and the landlord is covering the cost. Can you believe it? He's so understanding. That's fantastic, honey, I said, forcing enthusiasm. See, I told you not to worry. I know. It's like a huge weight has been lifted. We can finally focus on getting the rest of the renovations done. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of relief and despair. Relief that I had averted a crisis for them. Despair that I had deepened the pit of my own deception. As the weeks turned into months, the bakery slowly took shape. I continued my balancing act, listening, advising, and subtly intervening through Mark when needed. Once they were struggling to find a specific type of commercial up. I discreetly used my connections to find them a good deal on a high-quality model, routing the information through Mark, who then passed it to them. As a vendor, the landlord knows who has a good reputation. They were delighted. Our landlord is so helpful, Sarah would exclaim, completely unaware. The more I helped, the more entrenched I became in the lie. I was the silent partner in their business, providing resources and assistance from the shadows, knowing full well the devastating impact the truth would have. My sleep became more disturbed. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, replaying conversations, mentally checking off all the ways I could have slipped up. The thought of Sarah finding out kept me constantly on edge. I started to notice how much her mood, her happiness, was tied to the bakery's progress, it wasn't just a business for her and Emily. It was a tangible manifestation of their shared ambition, their lifelong dream. And I was standing on the precipice of shattering it all. The opening day drew near. They were working around the clock, fueled by caffeine and pure adrenaline. The aroma of freshly baked goods started to waft from the building during their test run. The Sweet Spot Bakery and Brew sign was hung above the door, its cheerful script a stark contrast to the tightening knot in my stomach. I knew I had to be there for the grand opening. I had to play the part of the proud husband, supporting my wife's new venture. But I also knew that every proud smile I offered, every congratulatory word would be a lie. I would be walking into my own building, watching my wife and her sister celebrate their success, knowing I was the silent, hidden owner, and that the foundation of their dream was built on a secret that could destroy us all. The weight of it was immense, a crushing burden that grew heavier with each passing day. The heartbreaking part wasn't just about the reveal. It was about the slow, agonizing process of living with the lie, knowing its destructive potential. The grand opening of Sweet Spot Bakery and Brews was a whirlwind of noise, sweet smells, and beaming faces. I stood in the bustling space, a glass of complimentary coffee in my hand, observing the scene. Sarah and Emily, dressed in matching aprons, moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting customers, bagging pastries, and pouring coffee. Their smiles were genuine, their energy infectious. They had built this. I felt a surge of immense pride. The place looked incredible. The warm lighting, the rustic wooden tables, the display cases filled with perfectly golden croissants and artfully decorated cakes. It was exactly as Sarah had envisioned it. Seeing her so happy, so fulfilled, was a powerful force. It also served to underscore the enormity of my deception. Amazing, isn't it? Sarah squeezed my arm, her eyes shining. All these people, I can't believe it. Beautiful, honey, I said, my voice thick with a mixture of genuine admiration and unspoken guilt. You two did an incredible job. We couldn't have done it without the landlord, Emily said, joining us, wiping a smudge of flour from her cheek. He's been so supportive. From fixing the plumbing to helping us with the oven, he's just been really great. My smile felt frozen on my face. Yes, he sounds like a good one. I tried to steer the conversation away from the landlord, but it was a recurring theme. Sarah and Emily frequently praised him, completely unaware they were praising me. It was agonizing. The bakery was an immediate hit. Yak spread quickly about their delicious pastries and excellent coffee. Soon there was a steady stream of customers, from early morning commuters grabbing a quick coffee and muffin to families enjoying leisurely weekend brunches. Sarah and Emily were working incredibly hard. They were exhausted, but their spirits remained high. They were living their dream. I continued my role as the supportive, but hands-off husband. I'd listen to their daily anecdotes. A tricky customer, a new recipe triumph, a minor equipment malfunction. I offered advice, always carefully worded, always from the perspective of an outsider. The oven seems to be having trouble regulating temperature, Sarah mentioned one evening, looking tired. Emily thinks it might need a recalibration. Mark said he'd send someone out next week. My blood ran cold. The oven was relatively new. It shouldn't be malfunctioning. I had gone out of my way to ensure they got a good one. Was it a fault with the appliance, or was something else going on? My immediate instinct was to check it myself, to make sure my investment and their livelihood was secure. But I couldn't. I was Alex, the husband, not the landlord. That's frustrating, I said, trying to sound sympathetic. Hopefully it's an easy fix. That night I called Mark about the oven at Sweet Spot. They're having trouble with the temperature. I want someone there first thing tomorrow, not next week, and make sure it's someone reliable who can diagnose it properly. If it needs replacing, replace it. My expense, Mark sighed, a faint sound. Mr. Miller, are you sure? These are brand new tenants. Standard protocol is to let them handle appliance issues unless it was faulty from the start. Mark, I want them to succeed, I said, my voice firm. And I don't want them to think for a second that their landlord is anything but fully supportive. Get someone there, tomorrow. Make it a courtesy visit from the landlord's maintenance team. Understood, Mr. Miller. Consider it done. The next day, Sarah called, buzzing with delight. Guess what? Mark sent a technician first thing this morning. He recalibrated the oven and he even checked all the other equipment, just to be thorough. He said he was there on behalf of the landlord, just making sure everything was running smoothly. How amazing is that? Our landlord really cares. I mumbled something about how great it was. My heart twisted. Each time I helped, the lie grew deeper, the web of deception more intricate. It was like building a house of cards, each card a small lie, stacked precariously higher and higher. As the weeks turned into months, the initial rush of the grand opening settled into a steady rhythm. But running a small business was hard, really hard. I started to hear the weariness in Sarah's voice, the worry lines etching themselves deeper around her eyes. The hours were brutal. They worked 6, sometimes 7, days a week. They hired a couple of part-time staff, but mostly it was just Sarah and Emily, baking late into the night, opening before dawn. We're just not seeing the profit margins we projected, Sarah admitted one evening, looking at a spreadsheet on her laptop. Ingredients are more expensive than we thought, and electricity bills are through the roof with those ovens running all day. We're breaking even maybe, but we're not making enough to pay ourselves much. My financial background kicked in. I wanted to sit down with them, go through their books, show them where they could cut costs, how they could optimize their pricing. But I couldn't, not as Annex, the husband. That would be too close to my role as the landlord, too knowledgeable about the intricacies of their business. Have you talked to your accountant? I asked, trying to keep my advice generic. Maybe there are tax credits you qualify for, or ways to streamline your supply chain. We're looking into it, she sighed, rubbing her temples. It's just too overwhelming with bakers, not accountants. I felt a pang of empathy. They were passionate, talented bakers. The business side, the relentless grind of managing finances, inventory, staff, and overhead, was clearly taking its toll. They were hitting the wall that many small business owners hit, the one where passion meets harsh reality. I considered anonymously sending them a business consultant, perhaps through Mark, but that felt too intrusive, too obvious. How many generous gestures could an anonymous landlord make before it started to look suspicious? The strain started to show in our home life too. Sarah was often too tired for anything but sleep. Our quiet evenings together became quieter, filled with her exhaustion rather than shared conversation. I missed our old routines, our comfortable silences that were no longer just comfortable, but filled with the unspoken weight of my secret. One Saturday morning, I decided to do something. I couldn't go to the bakery as Alex, but I could go as a regular customer. I put on a baseball cap, pulled it low, and walked into Sweet Spot. The place was bustling. Sarah was behind the counter, laughing with a customer. Emily was artfully decorating a cake. They looked busy, productive, but also clearly overworked. I ordered a coffee and a croissant. The croissant was flaky, buttery, perfect. The coffee was rich and strong. They were producing excellent products. The problem wasn't quality, it was profitability. As I sat there sipping my coffee, I watched Sarah. She caught my eye for a second, her smile faltering slightly as she realized it was me. She gave me a quick wave, then turned back to a customer. I just wanted to be there for her. Really there, without the immense, suffocating secret between us. The thought of revealing the truth was still terrifying. It would undoubtedly cause a massive rupture. The thought of not revealing it, of continuing to watch her struggle, knowing I held the key to so many of her problems, knowing I was actively deceiving her, was becoming equally unbearable. The longer this went on, the higher the stakes, the deeper the lie, the harder the fall. I was walking a tightrope, and the wind was picking up. The crack in our hearth was growing wider, a hairline fracture threatening to split our lives apart. The initial euphoria of sweet spot success began to wane, replaced by the grim reality of razor-thin margins. Sarah and Emily were exhausted, working harder than ever, yet seeing little financial reward. The joy in Sarah's eyes dimmed a little each week, replaced by a quiet weariness. Our once vibrant home felt muted, the silence heavy with her unspoken anxieties and my pervasive guilt. One evening, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open, staring blankly at a spreadsheet. "Alex," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "we're not making it. Not really. We're covering costs, but here is nothing left for us. Emily is talking about getting a part-time job somewhere else just to make ends meet." My heart sank. This was worse than I thought. I knew small businesses struggled, but to hear it directly from her, to see the defeat in her eyes, was agonizing. I knew their numbers. I had access to all their financial reports through Mark, the ones they submitted to the landlord. I saw the rising cost of ingredients, the unexpected repairs, the slow but steady drain on their initial capital. "What about raising prices?" I suggested, trying to sound helpful, but not too knowledgeable. Sarah shook her head. "We've already priced ourselves competitively. If we go higher, we'll lose customers to the chain coffee shops. We need volume, but we just don't have the staff for it right now." "What about staffing more? Or looking into cheaper suppliers?" I offered, care. We tried. Good bakers are expensive, and we can't compromise on quality ingredients. That's our brand, Alex. That's what makes us special. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate plea for a solution. "I just don't know what to do," I longed to tell her. To sit her down, take her hands and say, "Sarah, I know a way. I can help you, because I own the building and I can cut your rent, or I can invest more capital." But the words stayed trapped in my throat, choked by the weight of my secret. The longer I kept it hidden, the harder it became to reveal. The near misses were becoming more frequent, more terrifying. One afternoon, a letter arrived for the occupant of 212 Maple Street. It was from the city, a zoning amendment notice for the entire block. Sarah opened it absent-mindedly, then frowned. "Another notice about the Maple Street revitalization project. Seems like they're looking at changing some parking rules." I had been consulted on it as one of the major property owners in the area. I had even attended a few private meetings with the city council. "Oh, really?" I said, trying to sound casual. "What are they planning?" Sarah shrugged. "Something about wider sidewalks and maybe paid parking." "It's confusing," Mark said. "The landlord is handling all the official responses, so we don't have to worry about it." "Good," I said, forcing a smile. "That's what landlords are for, right?" Casual nature of her comment, the trust she placed in this anonymous figure, twisted the knife deeper. Another time, Sarah and Emily were discussing a potential expansion. "If we could just open up that back room," Emily mused, pointing to a section on a crude floor plan sketch. "We could put in more tables, maybe even host small events. But Mark said the landlord has plans for that space, so it's not available for lease right now. That's right, I heard myself say too quick. Probably has a long-term vision for the whole building. Sarah looked at me, a slight frown on her face. You know a lot about this landlord, Alex. Have you met him? My heart leaped into my throat. No, of course not. Just, common sense. Property owners usually have plans for their buildings. I laughed a little too loudly, feeling the blood rush to my face. Sarah seemed to accept the explanation, but the tiny flicker of suspicion in her eyes had been there, clear as day. I had almost slipped. The stress was making me careless. The financial pressure on Sarah and Emily continued to mount. Cut back on their own meager salaries, stopped ordering new equipment, and even considered reducing staff hours. I could see the toll it was taking on Sarah. She was constantly worried, her shoulders hunched with the weight of responsibility. I knew I couldn't let them fail. Not now. Not when I had the power to make a difference. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself that my initial rationale of protecting them was still valid. I just needed to be more creative about how I helped. I called Mark again. Mark, I need you to float an idea to them about the rent. Mr. Miller, they're already on a reduced rate for the first year, and you covered the plumbing and oven issues. Are you thinking of another reduction? Mark sounded weary, like a man dealing with an overly generous but eccentric client. No, not a reduction. I want to offer them a tenant improvement allowance. Say, a lump sum of money to invest in equipment upgrades, or a small expansion, or even just working capital. Fafs it as the landlord investing in his tenant's success, seeing their potential. Tenant improvement allowance for a new business, with no obligation for them to repay it. That's highly unusual, Mr. Miller. Most TAs are offset against future rent. I know it's unusual. That's why it will seem so generous. Just tell them, it's part of the landlord's commitment to fostering successful businesses in his properties. A way to help them grow and thrive because their success is his success. I was laying it on thick, creating a plausible narrative for my generosity. Mark paused for a long moment. All right, Mr. Miller, I'll make the offer. But this is definitely outside the norm. They'll either be incredibly grateful or incredibly suspicious. They'll be grateful, Mark. They're struggling. They need this. I hung up, a knot of anxiety twisting in my gut. What if Mark was right? What if this pushed them over the edge into suspicion? The next day, Sarah called me, her voice a mix of bewilderment and cautious optimism. Alex, you won't believe it, Mark just called. The landlord is offering us a tenant improvement allowance, a big one. To help us grow the business, he says he believes in us. She sounded unsure, almost wary. It's a lot of money, Alex, and it's not a loan. It's just a gift, essentially. It feels almost too good to be true. Why would he do that? My heart pounded. This was it. The moment of truth. Honey, I said, trying to sound calm and logical. Some landlords are just good business people. They understand that investing in their tenants helps everyone. If you succeed, he succeeds. It makes sense, right? I guess so, she said slowly. Just feels so unexpected. Emily thinks it's amazing. She thinks we should take it and put it into marketing. Maybe even hire another full-time baker. You should definitely consider it, I urged. It could be exactly what you need to turn the corner. She still sounded hesitant. I just wonder, who is this guy? He's so hands-off, we've never even met him. But he's so generous, it's a little strange, isn't it? My breath caught in my throat. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Sarah was starting to ask questions. Questions I couldn't answer without destroying everything. The heartbreaking moment felt closer than ever, a looming disaster. I had tried to be a benevolent force, but my very benevolence was now becoming the thing that would expose my elaborate lie. The web was getting too complex, too stretched. It felt like it could snap at any moment, and when it did, the fallout would be immense. The tenant improvement allowance, despite Sarah's initial apprehension, was a lifeline. They took it. They had to. Bakery was barely treading water, and this unexpected infusion of capital was exactly what they needed. With the money, they hired a full-time baker, invested in a better marketing campaign, and even updated some of their older equipment. For a while, the atmosphere at home lightened. Sarah was less stressed, more hopeful. But the questions about the landlord lingered. A low hum beneath the surface of their renewed optimism. "He's like an invisible guardian angel," Emily joked one evening, laughing. "Who is this guy? Why is he so invested in our little bakery?" Sarah would just give a small, thoughtful frown. "It is strange, isn't it? I mean, don't get me wrong, I am incredibly grateful. But it just seems a little too good to be true." I would just nod, offering vague platitudes about good landlords and smart investments, all the while feeling the cold sweat of impending exposure. Then the crisis hit. Not a financial one this time, but a physical one. It happened on a busy Saturday morning, the bakery packed with customers. Sarah called me, her voice shrill with panic. "Alex, you need to get here now. T here has been an accident. The old water heater in the back room exploded. Emily's hurt, and T here is water everywhere. It's a mess. My blood ran cold." The water heater. Another old dodgy appliance I'd meant to replace, but hadn't gotten around to. My stomach lurched. "I am on my way," I said, already grabbing my keys. When I arrived, the scene was chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance. The street was cordoned off. Firefighters were already on site assessing the damage. A crowd of curious onlookers had gathered. I pushed through them, my heart pounding. Inside, the bakery was a disaster zone. Water streamed from the back room, mixing with flour and sugar to create a viscous paste on the floor. Customers had been evacuated. Emily was sitting on a chair outside, clutching her arm, her face pale, paramedics attending to her. Sarah was talking frantically to a firefighter, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah!" I rushed to her side. "What happened? Are you okay, Emily?" "It just blew," she sobbed, burying her face in my chest. A huge bang. Emily was standing right there. Her arm is burned, but they think it's not too bad. "Oh, Alex, the bakery. It's ruined. It's all ruined." I looked at the devastation, a wave of guilt washing over me so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. This was my fault, all of it. The old water heater, the one I knew was a hazard, the one I should have replaced months ago. My secrecy had put them in danger. My deception had led to this. I found Mark, the property manager, talking to a police officer. His face was grim. He saw me, and his eyes widened slightly, a silent understanding passing between us. He knew this was my responsibility. "Mr. Miller," he said, acknowledging me just as he would any concerned spouse maintaining the facade. "This is a serious incident. We've got structural engineers coming in to assess the damage. It might be a while before they can reopen." "Emily needs to go to the hospital," Sarah said, pulling away from me, her voice shaking. "We need to go with her." "Go," I urged. "I'll stay here. I'll talk to Mark. See what can be done. Make sure she's okay." At the hospital, Emily was treated for second-degree burns. She would be fine, but it would take time to heal. Sarah was a wreck, overwhelmed by the accident, the damage to their business, and the worry for her sister. I stayed at the bakery for hours, watching the assessment, talking to Mark. The structural damage wasn't as bad as it looked, but the water damage was extensive, and the entire back wall needed to be rebuilt. It would take weeks, maybe months, to repair, and it would cost a fortune. "This is all on me, Mark," I said, my voice low, raw with emotion. "Every single penny. Get the best contractors, the fastest workers. I want this place back up and running as quickly as humanly possible. No expense spared, and I want them to be compensated for their lost income during the closure. Every single day." Mark just nodded, his expression somber. He knew. He had seen the truth laid bare by the burst pipe and the injured sister. "Understood, Mr. Miller. I'll make the calls. You are covering everything." "Everything," I confirmed. "And Mark, ensure they understand this is fully covered by the landlord. No questions about insurance, no arguments. The landlord takes full responsibility." Later that night, back at home, Sarah was curled up on the sofa, still shaken. "I don't know what we're going to do, Alex," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We barely have enough saved for emergencies. How are we going to pay for this? The income loss alone will bankrupt us." "Don't worry about it, honey," I said, holding her close. "Mark said the landlord is taking full responsibility. He's covering all the repairs, and he's even compensating you for the time you are closed. Every single day of lost income. He feels terrible about it." Sarah pulled back, looking at me, her eyes wide. "He's doing what? He's paying for all of it? And our lost income?" She seemed utterly stunned, almost disbelieving. "Why would he do that? He's not legally obligated to pay for lost income, unless it was gross negligence. And even then, it would be through insurance." My heart pounded. This was a critical point. She was questioning it directly. "He's just got good man, Sarah. He truly believes in your business. And he feels responsible because it happened in his building. He's going above and beyond." I desperately tried to make it sound plausible, pulling on every ounce of my acting ability. She looked at me, a long, searching look that pierced right through me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "No landlord does that, Alex. Not without a reason. Not without something bigger going on." My stomach dropped. She was close. Too close. "Maybe he just has a lot of money and wants to help," I offered weakly. "Or maybe T here is something else," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Something we don't know." She was no longer just wondering, she was suspecting. Crisis had pushed her beyond gratitude and into active inquiry. Truth felt like a heavy stone, dragging me down, threatening to pull me and everything I cherished into the abyss. The hearth wasn't just cracking anymore. It felt like it was beginning to crumble. The warmth of our life together fading with each lie I told. The water heater explosion was the turning point. The damage, Emily's injury, and the sheer generosity of the landlord had finally sparked Sarah's suspicion. She was no longer just curious. She was actively investigating. And I, the very subject of her investigation, was caught in a deepening web of my own making. "Alex, this compensation from the landlord," Sarah said one morning, her voice tight. "It's far too generous. It covers everything. Lost profits, even a bonus for the trouble we went through." "Who is this guy really?" I tried to feign nonchalance. "Maybe he has good insurance, or maybe he just has a big heart." Sarah shook her head. "Number Emily and I have been talking. No business in their right mind just hands over that kind of money. There has to be a reason. He's never met us. He's completely anonymous, but he's gone above and beyond at every single turn. The plumbing, the oven, the tenant improvement allowance, and now this. She paused, looking at me with an unnerving intensity. It's almost like he's personally invested, more than just a landlord. My heart pounded. She was dissecting every generous act, connecting the dots. Well, perhaps he sees potential in your business, I offered, my voice a little too casual. Or perhaps he knows us, Sarah said, her gaze unwavering. Perhaps he knows you, Alex. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Me? Why would he know me? I don't know, she admitted, rubbing her temples, but it feels poor. Off like a puzzle missing a piece. We talked to some other business owners on the block. Their landlord is a real stickler, barely returns calls, never offers a dime unless he has to. But ours, he's a saint. Conversation hung in the air, thick with unspoken question. I tried to change the subject, but Sarah's mind was clearly made up. She was on a mission. Over the next few days, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She was spending more time on her laptop, not for bakery work, but for something else. She'd get quiet when I entered a room. She was observing me. One evening, I overheard her talking to Emily on the phone. I just have this gut feeling, Em, about the landlord. And, Alex, it's too coincidental. The way Alex always knows just a little too much about property law or building issues. The way he always has an explanation for the landlord's generosity. My breath hitched. They were discussing me. My carefully constructed facade was crumbling. I started to panic. What could I do? Confess now? Or wait for them to uncover the truth? The latter seemed more likely at this point. I was trapped. I contacted Mark. Mark, I think they're getting suspicious. Sarah and Emily, they're asking questions. About the landlord, about the amount of help they've received. Mark sighed. I figured as much, Mr. Miller. It was getting harder and harder to justify some of your requests. Your benevolence was starting to defy logic. What do you want to do? I don't know, Mark, I admitted, my voice strained. Just don't say anything. Let them figure it out, or maybe they won't. Just don't confirm anything. I understand, Mr. Miller. My lips are sealed. The waiting was excruciating. Every quiet moment felt like an interrogation. Every casual question felt loaded. Sarah's eyes followed me, searching for clues. Then came the day of the internet deep dive. Came home from work to find Sarah and Emily huddled over Sarah's laptop. Papers spread out on the table, their faces grim. They looked up as I entered, and the silence in the room was deafening. It wasn't the usual comfortable silence. It was a hostile, accusatory one. Hey, I said, trying to sound normal, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. What's going on? Emily looked at Sarah, then back at me. Her expression was a mixture of confusion and anger. Sarah just stared, her face devoid of all warmth, a cold mask of betrayal. We were just doing some digging, Alex, Sarah said, her voice flat. About Maple Street Holdings LLC, our generous landlord. My blood ran cold. This was it. The moment I had dreaded for so long. Oh? I managed to croak. Yes, she continued, her voice gaining strength, a tremor of fury beneath it. It's a shell company, isn't it? Set up to hide the real owner. I didn't answer. My throat was dry. And it's not very well hidden, is it, Alex? Emily interjected, her voice rising. We found the registered agent, the one who filed the paperwork, a law firm downtown. And guess who their biggest client is? I swallowed hard, the taste of ash in my mouth. It's you, Alex, Sarah stated, her voice breaking on my name. The law firm that handles all your personal investments. The one you told me about years ago. Before we were married, when you bought that first big stock portfolio. Emily held up a printed page. And we found the public records, the property deeds. 212 Maple Street. It's owned by Maple Street Holdings LLC, and the principal owner of Maple Street Holdings LLC is Alex Miller. The air was sucked out of the room. The truth, raw and ugly, hung between us. The faces, once full of dreams and excitement, were now contorted with a mixture of shock, hurt, and profound betrayal. Sarah's eyes, the eyes I loved, were filled with tears, but also a fierce, burning anger I had never seen directed at me. "You own the building," Sarah whispered, the words filled with a pain that ripped through me. "You own our building, and you never told us. You lied to us all this time." My carefully constructed world imploded in that instant. The hearth, the warmth of our life, shattered into a million pieces. There was no going back, no pretending, no more excuses. The secret was out, and the devastation it had caused was far worse than anything I had ever imagined. My heart ached, a deep, unbearable pain for the trust I had broken, for the hurt I had inflicted, for the beautiful dream I had just poisoned. The confrontation had begun. The silence that followed Sarah's revelation was deafening, heavy with the weight of broken trust. My wife, the woman I loved more than anything, stood before me, her face pale, her eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and fury. Emily stood beside her, arms crossed, her expression a cold mask of disappointment. "Say something, Alex," Sarah finally whispered, her voice trembling. "Just say something. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you don't own the building where Emily and I poured our entire lives and savings into." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat was constricted, my mind a blank. What could I say? How could I explain years of deliberate deception? Truth, once confined to the shadows of my mind, was now exposed, glaring and ugly, in the harsh light of our living room. "It's true, isn't it?" Emily interjected, her voice sharp with accusation. "You own it. You've owned it all this time. You are the benevolent landlord, the generous benefactor. All those times we thanked him, it was you." I nodded slowly, unable to meet Sarah's gaze. My eyes fell to the floor, to the scattered papers that had revealed my secret. Legal documents, property records, the very proof of my betrayal. "Why, Alex?" Sarah's voice was barely audible, a raw, wounded sound. "Why would you do this? Why would you lie to me? To us? About something so huge, so fundamental to our life?" I finally forced myself to look up, to meet her pained eyes. I bought it years ago, Sarah," I stammered, my voice hoarse. "It was just an investment, a distressed property. I never really did anything with it. It just sat there." "Just sat there?" Emily scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "It was sitting there empty, waiting for us to come along and pour our blood, sweat and tears into it, while you watched, pretending you had no idea." "It wasn't like that," I pleaded, desperately trying to construct an explanation to make them understand. "When you told me you found the building, I panicked. I didn't know what to do." "You could have told me," Sarah interrupted, her voice rising now. "You could have said, 'Hey, honey, funny thing, that building, I own it.' You could have been honest." "I know," I admitted, the guilt a physical weight on my chest. "I should have, but you were so excited, so happy it was your dream. I didn't want to crush it. I didn't want to crush it. I didn't want to complicate things." "Complicate things?" Emily exploded, stepping forward. "You think this isn't complicated? You think stringing us along, watching us struggle, secretly helping us, is less complicated than just telling the truth from day one. I wanted to help you, I insisted, my voice pleading. When the plumbing broke, when the oven acted up, when you needed that tenant improvement allowance, I didn't want you to fail. I wanted you to succeed. I didn't want my ownership to overshadow your achievement. I wanted it to be your business, your success. Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. That's not helping, Alex. That's control. That's manipulation. You watched us, knowing everything, knowing our struggles, our fears, and you just let us twist in the wind, all while you held all the cards. The water heater, Emily added, her voice laced with disgust. You knew that thing was old. You knew it was a hazard. And you let us work there, let Emily get hurt, because you didn't want to reveal your secret. No, I cried out, the accusation cutting me deeply. That's not fair. I paid for everything. I took full responsibility. I felt terrible about it. Oh, you felt terrible? Sarah's voice was icy. You think paying for repairs makes up for years of lies? For the betrayal? For the fact that I shared everything with you? Every hope, every fear, every financial worry, and you just sat there, knowing you could fix it all, but you chose to play a game instead. It wasn't a game, Sarah, I pleaded, reaching out a hand to her, but she recoiled as if I had burned her. It was fear, fear of hurting you, fear of hurting you, fear of hurting your trust, fear of ruining your dream. You've already ruined it, she said, her voice hollow. Everything. The bakery, our partnership, our future. It's all tainted now. How can I ever trust you again, Alex? How can I ever look at you and not see the man who lied to me, who manipulated me, who watched me struggle while holding all the power? Emily nodded in agreement, her face hard. This isn't just about the building, Alex. This is about everything. Every single conversation we've ever had about the business, about our finances, about our hopes. It was all a lie to you. The accusation hung in the air, damning and undeniable. They were right. From their perspective, every interaction, every piece of advice I'd given, every moment of support had been tainted by my secret. I had built a wall of lies between us, brick by painful brick, and now that wall had come crashing down, crushing everything in its path. Sarah looked around the living room at the life we had built together, and then back at me, her eyes filled with a grief so profound it twisted my gut. I don't know who you are anymore, Alex, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know if I ever truly knew you. The words hit me harder than any shout, any accusation. Sarah, please, I begged, tears finally welling in my eyes. Don't say that. Please, I love you. Do you? She asked, her voice filled with a terrible sadness. 'Cause I don't know how someone who loves me could do this. This betrayal, this kind of calculated deception. She turned, her shoulders shaking, and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, alone amidst the wreckage of my secret. Emily followed her, giving me one last look of utter contempt before the door clicked shut. I sank onto the sofa, the papers still scattered on the coffee table, mocking me with their cold, legal truth. The silence in the house was now absolute, heavier than any I had ever known. It was the silence of a broken heart, a shattered trust, a ruined life. The hearth was not just broken, it was cold, the fire extinguished by the very hand that had sought to keep it warm. I had made a terrible, irreversible mistake, and now I had to live with the devastating consequences. The night Sarah discovered my secret was the longest of my life. She didn't come back to our bedroom. I heard her moving around in the guest room, then the sound of muffled sobs that slowly faded into silence. Emily had gone home. but not before delivering a blistering lecture about honesty and trust, telling me I had ruined everything. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in my head. Her face, her tears, the look of utter betrayal. Each memory was a fresh stab to my heart. My carefully constructed life, the one I thought was so stable and loving, had imploded, and it was all my fault. The next morning, the house was filled with a chilling quiet. Sarah emerged from the guest room, her eyes red and swollen, her face set in a grim line. She didn't look at me. She went straight to the kitchen, made herself a coffee, and sat at the table, staring out the window. I tried to approach her. "Sarah, please, can we talk?" She turned her head slowly, her eyes still holding that terrible, wounded look. "What is there to say, Alex? You lied. For years, about something incredibly important, about our business. I know, and I am so sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but I just want you to understand why." "I don't think I can understand," she said, her voice flat. "Help me understand why you thought it was okay to build a foundation of deception under our lives. Why you thought it was okay to watch me and Emily pour our life savings into a building you secretly owned. Why you didn't trust me with something so significant." "It wasn't a lack of trust in you, Sarah," I explained, my voice desperate. "It was complicated. When I bought the building years ago, it was just an investment. I had plans for it, big plans, but they fell through. It just became a dormant asset, something I didn't actively think about. It was a failure in a way, a project I never completed. I never told you because it felt like a minor thing, something that wasn't relevant to our shared life. And then when you and Emily found it, and you were so excited, so full of dreams, I panicked." I swallowed, trying to compose myself. "I thought, if I told you then, it would change everything. It would turn your dream into Alex's building, into Alex's building, into Alex's handout. I wanted it to be yours, your achievement. I wanted you to build it from the ground up, on your own terms. I wanted to see you succeed, truly succeed, based on your own hard work and talent. And I thought if I told you, it would taint that. It would make you feel indebted, or like your success wasn't fully your own." "So you chose to deceive me instead?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "You thought lying was a better option than simply being honest with your wife, than sharing a significant part of your financial life with me?" "I know it sounds insane now," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "But in that moment, it felt like the only way to protect your dream, to let you fly. And then, once the lie started, it just kept getting bigger. Every time I helped you, every time I made sure things went smoothly, it was another layer of deception. I saw you struggling, and I couldn't bear it. I just wanted to make things easier, without you knowing it was me. It was never meant to hurt you, Sarah. Never. But it did, Alex," she said, her voice cracking. "It did hurt. It hurt so much. I feel like our entire relationship is a lie. Like everything we built together is tainted. Every time you complimented the bakery, every time you offered me advice, every time you comforted me when I was worried about money, it was all a performance, wasn't it? You knew. You always knew." "No, it wasn't a performance," I insisted, my voice thick with emotion. "My love for you, my pride in your work, my desire to see you happy and successful, all of that was real. It was just wrapped up in this terrible secret. The only thing that wasn't real was the anonymous landlord. Everything else, the emotion, the connection, that was absolutely genuine." "How can I believe that, Alex? How can I separate the genuine from the deception now?" Every memory is now filtered through this lens of betrayal. I looked up to you. I trusted you implicitly. You were my safe place, my partner, and you kept this from me. You played a long game, a very risky game, with my life and Emily's life. I messed up, Sarah. Royally, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I made a terrible mistake, and I take full responsibility for it. I know it's going to take a long time, maybe forever, to earn back your trust, but I am willing to do whatever it takes. Anything. Just don't give up on us. Don't give up on me. She finally looked at me directly, her eyes still brimming with tears, but a flicker of something else there too. Perhaps contemplation. Perhaps just utter exhaustion. I don't know, Alex. I honestly don't know. I need time. A lot of time. To process this. To figure out what this means for us. For the bakery. For everything. The bakery. The silent elephant in the room. What about Sweet Spot? I asked. I don't know, she repeated, her voice hoarse. How can we continue to operate in a building owned by you, knowing what we know? It feels wrong, like we're still part of your secret, like we're living a lie. You don't have to pay rent, Sarah, I offered, desperate to show her I was sincere, that I truly wanted to make amends. You can have it for free, you can own it. I'll transfer the deed, whatever you want. She flinched. No, don't you dare, Alex. Don't you dare try to give us the building as some kind of penance. That would just make it worse. That would be another layer of obligation, another layer of your generosity. She stood up, her eyes flashing with a renewed anger. This isn't about money, Alex. This is about trust, about respect, about honesty. Things that you clearly value very little. She walked past me, grabbed her bag and headed for the door. I am going to Emily's, she said without turning around. I need to talk to her. We need to figure out what to do. About the bakery, about everything. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone in the shattered silence of our home. My heart ached, with a pain more profound than I had ever known. The hearth was not just broken, it was cold and empty. The warmth of our life together replaced by the chilling winds of betrayal. Consequences of my secret were unfolding, tearing apart the very fabric of my world, leaving me in the painful, desolate aftermath. The days that followed were a blur of agonizing silence and suffocating guilt. Sarah stayed at Emily's, communicating only through terse text messages, mostly about practical matters concerning the bakery. Emily refused to speak to me at all. My life, once filled with a comfortable rhythm of shared moments and easy conversation, was now a desolate landscape of self-recrimination. I tried to give Sarah space, as she had requested. I knew I couldn't force her to forgive me, or even to talk to me. The damage was immense, and it would take more than just apologies to fix it. It would take time and genuine effort to rebuild the trust I had so carelessly shattered. The bakery remained closed for repairs. Contractors I hired were working around the clock, their hammers and drills echoing through the usually bustling space. It was a constant, tangible reminder of the accident, of Emily's injury, and of my deep-seated deception. One evening, after nearly a week of this unbearable isolation, Sarah texted me. Emily and I want to meet you at the bakery tomorrow. 10 a.m. My heart leaped with a mixture of fear and a fragile hope. A meeting. Not a reconciliation, but at least a step towards addressing the impossible situation. I arrived at 212 Maple Street, punctually. The repairs were mostly done, though the air still smelled faintly of fresh paint and sawdust. Sarah and Emily were already there, standing in the middle of the main seating area, looking around with solemn faces. They both looked tired, their eyes still holding the residue of hurt, but their expressions were resolute. "Thank you for coming, Alex," Sarah said, her voice formal. "Of course," I replied, my voice raspy. "How's your arm, Emily?" Emily gave a curt nod. "Healing, thanks." "We've been talking," Sarah continued, taking a deep breath, "a lot about everything. About the bakery, about us." My heart pounded. This was it, the verdict. "First the bakery," Sarah said. "We can't operate here anymore. Not like this, not knowing you own it. It feels suffocating, like we're constantly being watched or managed or indebted. It's not our dream if it's built on your secret." A cold dread spread through me. But the repairs are almost done. You've invested so much." "We know," Emily interjected, her voice calmer than I expected, but firm. "And that's why we've come up with a plan. We're going to find a new location. We've already started looking." "A new location?" I felt a surge of despair. "But that will set you back so much. All that effort here. It's the only way we can move forward," Sarah said, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "To truly make it ours. To build something that is genuinely independent, without any hidden strings." "What about this building then?" I asked, looking around the beautifully renovated space. "What about the lease?" "We'll honor the lease until we find a new space," Sarah stated. "We don't want to leave you high and dry. We'll pay rent until we're out. But we're going to break it as soon as we can. We're getting a lawyer to look into the terms." "You don't have to pay rent," I said quickly. "I told you. You can have it for free. Or I'll sell it to you at a nominal price. Anything to make this right." "No, Alex," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "We are not accepting charity from you, especially not on the back of this deception. We will pay what we owe, and then we will leave. We need a clean break. For the business. For our sanity." I slumped against a counter, the finality of her words hitting me like a physical blow. The bakery, their dream, would move on, but without me, and haunted by my secret. "And for us, Alex?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What about us? What about our marriage?" Sarah looked at Emily, then back at me. Her expression softened slightly, but a deep sadness remained. "That's the harder part. I don't know, Alex. I really don't know. I love you, I do. But I don't know how to trust you anymore. How to erase this." She gestured vaguely between us. "This fundamental breach." "I want to try, Sarah," I pleaded, my voice choked with emotion. "I know I messed up. I know it's going to take time. Years, maybe. But I am willing to do anything to earn your trust back. I'll go to therapy. I'll be completely transparent about everything. Every single financial decision, every asset, every plan, no more secrets. Ever." Emily stepped forward. "It's going to be incredibly hard, Alex. You broke a major part of what made your marriage strong. You broke her trust and mine. This isn't just about a building. It's about a pattern of secrecy." "I know," I said, looking at both of them, tears streaming down my face. "And I hate myself for it. But I am willing to work for it. To live with the consequences and to actively try to rebuild what I destroyed if you'll let me." Sarah looked away, then back at me, her eyes filled with a raw, vulnerable honesty. "I am not saying it's over, Alex. Not definitively. But I can't stay at home right now. I need space. To think, to heal, to figure out if I can ever truly forgive this. If I can ever truly trust you again." "I understand," I said, the words heavy in my mouth. "I'll give you all the space you need, and I'll be here, waiting, working, for as long as it takes." She nodded slowly, We'll be in touch about the bakery, about everything." Then, with one last painful look, she and Emily turned and walked out of the bakery, leaving me standing alone in the quiet, newly repaired space. My building, their former dream. The silence that settled around me was profound. It wasn't the hostile silence of accusation anymore, but the heavy silence of a future uncertain. The hearth, once a symbol of our shared life and warmth, lay shattered. It would take an immense effort, and perhaps years, to gather the pieces, to try and mend it. And even then, it would always bear the scars of my terrible hidden truth. I had learned a devastating lesson about the true cost of secrecy and the immense value of trust. And I knew with every fiber of my being that I would spend the rest of my life trying to atone for the heartbreaking choices I had made.